oftentimes when I used to hire people, they might have felt like a great fit for me. And if I had any bit of doubt, I'd always go back to them and say, look, don't set yourself up for failure by accepting this job. If you don't feel like you can be the best person here and this is a good fit, don't just do it for the money. And I had a few people circle back and go, you know what, after thinking about it, well, it's probably not the right place for me. Because I think oftentimes people do set themselves up for failure and go down a road that's not necessarily a fit. And then everybody winds up, behind the gun because it wasn't good for anybody.
Yeah, I remember growing up, there was a guy on the radio. He said, people treat their lives like, they're being washed over by a tidal wave. I mean, they just do things. And it would be like, oh, I got my girlfriend pregnant. I'm 21 years old. Well, why'd you do that? It just happened, right? People go through life, just happened. How'd you get into this job you didn't like? Well, I don't know. They offered me a job, so I guess I should take it. And I guess my message is go where you're treated best. It's about living intentionally.
Yeah.
I had some friends just move out of Singapore. Tax rates are pretty low. Salaries are high. Nice place to live. I have a house nearby in Kuala Lumpur, so I like that area a lot. They're moving to San Francisco. They're going to give half their money away. Rents are through the roof. Quality of life, in my opinion, not as good. But you know what? If they've made an intentional decision, that's what's better for them, then they've gone where they're treated best. I don't think people put much thought into this stuff.
Yeah, no, I think we can all do our own research really on ourselves to understand more about what our wants, needs, likes, and abilities are. There's a number of topics I would love to cover with you, but I'm fascinated by a couple of books that you wrote, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about the Nomad Capitalist book itself and the premise behind that. And then maybe we can talk a little bit about Millionaire Expat because, Mexico for me is such a sweet spot. I just would love to hear your perspective and a little bit more about building wealth, as it says, how to build wealth living overseas, in our case, just south of the border.
Yeah. Well, I've written one book called Nomad Capitalist. My editor wrote a book called World Schooling, which he talked about raising your children intentionally. So for the parents listening who are thinking, maybe the public school system is not the answer, or who think, oh, I can't be a nomad capitalist and live somewhere else because I have kids. World Schooling was a great book. But yeah, Nomad Capitalist was kind of my manifesto on go where you're treated best and different ways you can manifest that. So There's a financial way to manifest it, i.e., if you live in a country with lower taxes. Now I'm dramatically oversimplifying it, but if you live in a country or countries with lower taxes, you can pay zero, you can pay less, you can pay a lot less. That's one way to benefit. You can protect your money by putting it in stronger banks. I'm here in Mexico. A lot of people understand we don't like our banks that much. There's some undue influence at times, like we like to put our money somewhere else where it's more safe. You can set your company up somewhere else. You can hire people somewhere else. As I've talked about, I hire a lot in Eastern Europe. Lower risk, cost less while still giving them more than they'd make from anywhere else. I want to be the best employer there. There's also the lifestyle component of Nomad Capitalist, which is I talk about how to get a second passport, how to be a dual citizen, how to take advantage of that, how to live in other countries. And then I talk about investing. I see a lot of great opportunities around the world. And so, and there's other thing. Again, it's dating. My wife and I are not from the same place. Now, if you're looking for a plan that we charge 5 figures to put together, this has been a critique from a few folks. I have a service. I admit it. It's pitched on page 276 of the book, like anyone who writes a book these days. And no, you're not going to buy a $9 book and get a $12,000 consulting plan. What you are going to get is a lot of ideas, and especially if you're new to this stuff, you're going to learn how it works. You're going to hear some stories. I'm going to show you why it's not so scary to go and put your money in another country and that kind of stuff. And I think that's what I'm trying to put out there is, this stuff is doable. It's legal. It's not scary. And it's the way for you to be intentional about your life.
Yeah, I like that point about being intentional for your life because I think oftentimes, again, we just kind of bounce through life without intent, and we look back and go, wow, where did the time go? How come I'm not achieving my goals? How come I'm not living that life that I thought I was going to be living at this age? And by applying some intent and getting to where you want to be is way more rewarding.
And I think I'm trying to open up a new category of intent because, you look at these guys in digital marketing. I don't follow the digital marketing space as much as I used to, but, I use the kind of proverbial example of, hey, if you change the button color, you can increase conversions by 7%. Well, you know what you can do to increase your profit by 40%? You cannot live in the United States. You cannot live in Canada or Australia. And yet people just assume, even very successful business gurus, you watch Shark Tank, for example, on television, they're like, oh, okay, so it's 10 million after tax at 7 million. It doesn't have to be, right? That's just one example. I mean, but to entrepreneurs who are thinking, how do I squeeze more money out of my business? I love it when I sign up for certain software programs and I see the companies in Malta. It means they're paying a relatively low amount of tax. And it means if you're in California competing with them, you're going to have a very hard time competing with them because their workforce is international and their taxes are a lot lower. And they can undercut you and pour boiling oil over your head as a competitor. And so what I'm trying to say is intentionality is important. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are successful because of that. But let's expand the tent. Let's expand. Why couldn't you hire somewhere else? Because we've been told we have to stay within our own tribe. And, we're in about the third decade almost of the 21st century. I thought we had passed that. But tribalism runs strong. It's a hard thing to die.
Yeah, and by the way, I apologize. I pulled up your book and that other one popped up. I realized the last name was wrong, so I apologize for mentioning that. Something did stand out to me that I wanted to circle back on that's on your website. You talk about by the time you were 22, you were making more money than you ever expected. And then you were paying a lot of money in taxes. I think so many people get wrapped up into that ring as well. How do we fix that or stay out of that trap? And how was dropping out of Arizona State a good thing for you so you can make all that money?
Well, there's an example of I was in high school. I think I'm an intelligent person. I don't know. I mean, once you become an adult, you realize intelligence doesn't really matter. Some of the most successful people I know are very average intelligent. They have $100 million. But I think I was intelligent. I just didn't care that much in high school. I was distracted by other things. I went to university, I guess, just because I didn't have, at 18, I didn't want to stand up to my parents in the way of saying, I'm not going. I didn't feel comfortable doing that. And so, I've made a lot of these mistakes. I'm not here trying to proselytize, as some kind of, perfect person. That was the mistake that I made. I never wanted to go to school. And so by dropping out, I was forced to sink or swim, which is an environment that I think entrepreneurs thrive in. And so I started a business. I guess I should say, I wasn't making more money than I thought I'd make at 14 years old, as I told you. But I kind of reset and got into normality when I became an adult and what do we need to do? And so I think that the vicious cycle for me that I learned firsthand was, number one, you can think about something theoretically. That doesn't mean that you're going to think about it practically. People call me all the time. Andrew, I'm paying $1 million in tax. We can reduce it to $200,000. Great. The whole package for me to set up is $50,000. And a lot of people do it.
Yeah.
They're risks about it. Paying $50,000 to basically get an ROI. I mean, like if you could buy a stock at $50,000 turned into $800,000, then every year they pay you another $800,000 for free, you buy that stock. But it's a hard thing for people to do. People like to wring their wrists about investing in themselves. So the fact that you theoretically are in pain, paying $1 million in tax, does not mean that you will, do it. Because I spent my entire childhood being a libertarian and being against tax, and I did nothing to prevent the tax. The second point is, we put more effort into Googling the sushi restaurant we're going to dinner tonight. If you go on Google and you see a sushi restaurant has a 3.4 stars, you ain't going to that sushi restaurant. You're finding another place. Yeah. Because we're so used to everything being 4.8 stars and it's manufactured and blah, blah, blah. What rating would you give your government? What rating would you give what star rating would you give the government that's controlling all these people that work for you, that sets all the laws, that dictates how much money you pay, that, sets the terms of your entire business, basically? Would you give them 4.8 stars? Do you think the U.S. government or any other government is managing your money when you pay them all this money with 4.8 stars? Do you think their laws that doing business are 4.8 stars? No, it's not even 3.4 stars. It's probably 1.2 stars. Everyone would hate them. But we've come to accept, well, you just can't do anything about that. You got to play the game. And I think for me, the secret to my success has been I refuse to play any game.
I love it. I got to tell you, you'll probably appreciate this story. I was working with a client, he and his partner, fortunate enough to be a fly on the wall in their private jet flying from Mexico to Las Vegas, when one of them says to the other, and by the way, they're both worth over $200 million, He says, I was with the accountant and the CPA this week, and there's this thing called estate taxes. And when we pass, our kids are going to have to pay a lot of tax. And the other partner, and you would think after making that kind of money, he would understand estate taxes 100%. And by the way, the kids were on the plane. He said, what do you mean they got to pay that much tax on the estate? They were baffled. They didn't know what to do. And I think that oftentimes we go through life assuming that just because somebody's making a lot of money, they got it all figured out. These guys were in a serious conundrum on the plane, wondering what would happen if they passed and their $200 million went to their kids.
Oh, absolutely. Number one. Listen, I've learned this lesson because, I was 22, 23 and making, a good deal of money. And again, I think we all have a motivation. Maybe the motivation of some of the modern day, Insta entrepreneurs is, I'm getting at the cubicle, free the rat race. That's become kind of a new movement. But for kind of us old school dinosaur entrepreneurs, I think if we're honest with ourselves, it's, someone spit in our face at some point. It's like, I got to be successful. It's like, I'm going to be successful so I can date the supermodels that won't date me now. I mean, as guys, I think there's some of that involved with a lot of it. And so, what's interesting is when you become 23, and I say this now with our people, because we have guys who are, 23, 24, making $500,000, $1 million. We have people who are 60 who have, $100 million. What's interesting is the guys who are 60 have figured out, hey, I'm one of many, they're very cool about it. When you're 23 and making a lot of money, you think you're the hottest thing going. I've been there. And that's why I can say to some of these guys, hey, dude, you know what? Yeah, you're right. You don't know about the estate tax. You don't know about this. You don't know about that. And I think it's a frustrating thing for me, particularly in my area, where, we attract a certain kind of libertarian person, not the client, but the audience. Mm-hmm. These people they don't trust doctors about medicine. They don't trust scientists about science. They're smarter than everybody. And I just think what a terrible way to run a life, but to run a business. Last night I went to a restaurant, the number 12 rated restaurant in the world here in Mexico City named Pujol. And, the service wasn't bad. They're very pleasant, but it was a little timid at first. And they came over and said, you want something to drink? And I said, well, what, maybe a menu would be, drink menu. And they said, okay, bring it over. They said, do you want a wine? And I see the sommelier walking around. I say, you know what? I know something about wine, but I don't know as much as the sommelier at the number 12 restaurant in the world. I said, why are you asking me what I want to want? Send that guy over here. I want him to tell me what I'm going to drink.
Yeah.
Let him decide. And I think that's an area where a lot of us entrepreneurs, I've worked very hard to get over it, but I still see a lot of folks suffering. They want to be the guy who tells the sommelier what kind of wine it's a terrible way to run a business.
We dropped off for a second. It's interesting because, restaurants could have their life together on so many fronts, but yet they miss those small little details as you suggested. That's what the sommelier is there for, right? Make a suggestion.
I literally told him, I said, I'm a pretty intense person at times. And I said this with great respect. I said, listen, if you want to learn how to reduce your tax rate to 2%, you should come to me and you should listen. Okay. If I want to order the best wine at your restaurant, the best restaurant in the city, I don't want to have an opinion. I'm dumb. I'm ceding to you. Okay. I'm going, and I think this is an area that, I look at is, people say, Andrew, why won't you help me? I said, the best way I can help you is I'm the doctor. You come in, you sit at my little table, butt naked, your butt sticking up in the air, and I'm going to examine you and we're going to figure out what's going on. And I think that, it's not something that I say because I want the power of being the doctor, because I try and go and listen to people's opinions all the time. I know what I know, and I don't know what I don't know. And I think that's really where business owners should be.
Yeah, I'm just bouncing through your website briefly here as we're talking. There are so many interesting and relevant points that you make and you guys help support and educate with. Oftentimes in business, I teach people that by reducing your expenses, you're actually making money, because I think so often we throw money out the window that could easily be saved and spent elsewhere. Just as you suggest saving on taxes, going from 43% to 1% tax rate. I mean, people just don't think in those terms. They're so busy trying to make more. They don't realize that it's also equally important to reduce. And it's part of the reason why I'm here in Montana.